Lena Harper steps off a Horizon Airways flight in New York, her suit pristine despite a bandage on her wrist and a faint bruise on her cheek, whispering to a lawyer on her phone about destroying them all. Hours earlier, she'd boarded in Los Angeles as a first-class passenger, only to be forced to stand by a sneering flight attendant who didn't know Lena owned the airline. What started as a petty insult spiraled into a nightmare that would unravel lives, expose corruption, and ignite a war she'd win at a devastating cost. How far would she go to reclaim her power? Before we dive in, let us know where you're watching from, and if you stand for justice against all odds, hit like and subscribe for more epic showdowns. Lena Harper strode through the bustling Los Angeles International Airport, her polished black blazer catching the fluorescent lights as she adjusted the strap of her laptop bag over her shoulder, her mind already racing toward the high-stakes merger meeting awaiting her in New York, a deal that would cement Horizon Airways as an untouchable titan in the industry, her industry, though no one here knew that yet. At 42, she carried herself with the kind of quiet authority that didn't beg for attention, but demanded it anyway, her deep brown skin glowing under the soft sheen of sweat from the California heat, her short, coiled hair bouncing slightly, with each purposeful step as she approached the gate for Flight 732, her heels clicking against the tiled floor like a metronome counting down to something inevitable. She'd booked first class, as always, not for the luxury but for the space to work, her fingers itching to finalize the numbers that would shift the balance of power in her favor, a secret she guarded as fiercely as the airline itself, which she'd built from a struggling regional carrier into a national force over the past 15 years, all while keeping her ownership hidden behind a maze of proxies and silent partners. The gate agent, a young woman with a tight ponytail, barely glanced at Lena as she scanned her boarding pass, muttering a perfunctory welcome aboard before waving her through, and Lena stepped onto the jetway, the cool, recycled air hitting her face as she descended toward the plane, her thoughts already on the contracts she'd review mid-flight, oblivious to the storm brewing just ahead. Inside the aircraft, the cabin hummed with the low chatter of passengers settling in, the faint scent of coffee and jet fuel mingling as Lena made her way down the narrow aisle, her eyes scanning the plush leather seats of first class, her assigned spot, 2A, waiting like a throne she'd earned 1,000 times over, though she'd never flaunt it. Not here. Not yet. She slid her laptop bag onto the overhead bin with practiced ease, her movements smooth and deliberate, then sank into the seat, crossing her legs and smoothing her tailored gray slacks, the fabric cool against her skin as she pulled out her phone to check one last email from her COO, Marcus, confirming the merger team was prepped and ready on the other end. The plane wasn't full yet, and the soft rustle of bags and murmured conversations filled the space, a few heads turning as she passed, some with curiosity, others with something harder to read. But Lena ignored them all, her focus razor-sharp, her world a bubble of strategy and control that nothing could pierce, or so she thought. Then came the footsteps, sharp and clipped, cutting through the ambient noise like a blade, and Lena glanced up to see a flight attendant approaching, a wiry woman in her late 30s with pale skin stretched tight over high cheekbones, her blonde hair pulled into a severe bun that matched the pinched smile plastered across her face, her name tag glinting under the cabin lights. Karen Voss, a name Lena wouldn't forget, though she didn't know it yet. Karen stopped beside Lena's seat, her blue eyes narrowing as they raked over her, lingering on the rich brown of her hands resting on her lap, then flicking to the first-class ticket stub poking out of Lena's blazer pocket, her lips twitching, as if she'd tasted something sour, and Lena felt the air shift, a subtle chill settling in despite the warmth of the cabin. Without a word, Karen leaned in, her voice low but dripping with suspicion, asking to see Lena's boarding pass, her tone clipped and formal, like she was addressing a trespasser rather than a passenger. And Lena raised an eyebrow, surprised, but unruffled, reaching into her pocket to retrieve the slip of paper, her fingers brushing the smooth edge as she handed it over, her calm unshaken, figuring this was just a routine check, a glitch in the system she'd sort out in seconds. Karen snatched it, her nails digging into the paper as she held it up to the light, squinting as if it were a counterfeit bill, her jaw tightening as she muttered something under her breath, the words barely audible but sharp enough to cut. Quotas, handouts, the kind of venom that slithered out when people thought no one was listening, and Lena's stomach tightened, not with fear but with recognition, the old, familiar sting of being sized up and found wanting for no reason other then the color of her skin. Karen's eyes flicked back to Lena, her smile gone now, replaced by a smirk that didn't reach her eyes. And she straightened up, her voice rising just enough for the nearby passengers to hear, saying, "This looks fake. I need you to stand over there until we sort this out," pointing toward the galley at the front of the plane like she was shooing a stray dog. Her words laced with a smug certainty that made Lena's blood simmer, though her face stayed a mask of cool composure. Lena tilted her head, her voice steady as she asked what exactly was wrong with it. Her tone polite but edged with steel, the kind of question that demanded an answer, not a deflection. But Karen didn't flinch, just rolled her eyes and repeated, herself louder this time, "Stand over there now," her hand hovering near her radio as if she'd call for backup if Lena didn't comply. And the cabin went quiet, heads turning, eyes widening, some passengers shifting uncomfortably in their seats while others leaned forward, eager for the drama unfolding before takeoff. Lena took a slow breath, her mind racing through options, knowing she could flash her credentials right then and there, end this nonsense with a single sentence. But something stopped her, a flicker of defiance, a need to see how far this would go, how deep the rot ran. So she stood, her movements deliberate, her chin high as she gathered her laptop bag and stepped into the aisle, her heels echoing in the silence as she walked toward the galley, Karen trailing behind her like a predator, scenting blood. The other flight attendants glanced over, one a young man with a nervous twitch, the other an older woman who avoided eye contact, and Lena stood there, her back straight, her bag clutched in one hand, the weight of a dozen stares pressing against her, some sympathetic, some hostile, but all of them wrong, assuming she was just another passenger caught in a mix-up, not the woman who owned every inch of this plane, every seat, every rivet, every soul aboard. Karen crossed her arms, her smirk widening as she radioed the gate, her voice crackling through the static, saying, "We've got a problem up here. Someone's where they don't belong." And Lena's fingers tightened around her bag, her calm facade hiding the storm building inside. The realization that this wasn't just a mistake, it was a challenge, a gauntlet thrown down by someone who had no idea who she was messing with. And as the plane's engines rumbled to life, pushing them toward the runway, Lena knew this was only the beginning. That what started as a petty insult would spiral into something much bigger, something that would test her in ways she hadn't foreseen, something that would leave scars, both visible and hidden. By the time she stepped off, in New York, she stood there, her eyes locked on Karen's back as the flight attendant strutted away, oblivious to the fact that she'd just lit the fuse on a powder keg, one that would explode in ways she couldn't imagine. And Lena's mind shifted, not to retreat, but to strategy, to the moves she'd make next, because if Karen wanted a fight, she'd get one. And Lena Harper didn't lose, not ever, not even when the odds were stacked against her, not even when the world refused to see her for who she really was. Lena Harper stood rigid near the galley, her laptop bag clutched tight against her chest as the plane taxied toward the runway, the hum of the engines vibrating through her bones while passengers craned their necks to gawk, some with smirks curling, their lips, others shifting awkwardly in their seats, their eyes darting away like they'd witnessed something shameful but didn't dare speak up. And Lena felt the weight of it all, not just the stares but the unspoken assumption that she didn't belong, that her presence in first class was some kind of glitch in the natural order, a notion she'd faced 1,000 times before, but never with such brazen hostility. Karen Voss hovered nearby, her arms crossed, her smirk a jagged slash across her face as she watched Lena like a hawk circling prey, her radio crackling faintly as she leaned in to mutter something to the young flight attendant with the twitchy hands who nodded nervously and scurried off, leaving Lena alone under the fluorescent glare of the galley lights, her blazer suddenly feeling too tight, too hot, though she kept her chin high, her expression a fortress of calm that hid the fury simmering beneath. The older flight attendant, a woman with gray streaks in her hair and a face carved from years of indifference, shuffled past without a glance, her silence louder than words, and Lena's mind raced, cataloging every detail, every slight, knowing this wasn't just Karen's doing but something bigger, something woven into the fabric of this crew, this airline, her airline, though they didn't know it yet, and that ignorance was about to cost them dearly. Karen lifted her radio again, her voice cutting through the cabin's low buzz, crisp and deliberate as she called the gate, alleging Lena had snuck into first class, her words dripping with accusation, saying, "We've got an unauthorized passenger. Up here, need to verify before we're airborne." And Lena's jaw tightened, her fingers flexing against her bag as she fought the urge to snap back, to reveal the truth right then and there, but she held it in, letting the scene play out, curious to see how far this web of bias stretched. The response came quick, a staticky grunt from the gate agent confirming they'd flagged her ticket, and before Lena could process it, the pilot's voice boomed over the intercom, a gruff baritone thick with impatience. "This is Captain Ted. We've got a situation. Passenger in 2A needs to move to the rear. Now, no questions, no checks. Just an order barked out like Lena was cargo to be shuffled, and the cabin erupted in whispers, heads swiveling, phones slipping out of pockets. As passengers started recording, some with glee, others with unease, but none stepping in, none challenging the absurdity of it all. Karen strode over, her heels stabbing the carpet, and pointed toward the back of the plane, her eyes glinting with triumph as she snapped, "You heard him. Move it." And Lena took a slow, deliberate breath, her mind spinning through scenarios, knowing she could end this with a single call, a single word, but instead she nodded, her movements measured as she turned and walked down the aisle, her heels echoing like gunshots in the silence. Every step a testament to her restraint, though her blood boiled with the injustice of it, the sheer gall of being banished from her own domain. Halfway down, she felt a tug at her elbow, Karen's bony fingers digging in as the flight attendant hissed, "Faster, we don't have all day." And Lena's calm cracked just enough for her to pull out her phone, her thumb hovering over the record button, her voice low and steady as she said, "You're making a mistake, you should know that." A warning wrapped in velvet, but Karen's eyes flared and she snatched the device from Lena's hand, her nails scraping skin as she snarled, "No recording, that's a security risk, you're done here." And Lena's breath caught, not from fear, but from the audacity, the theft, the power play that stripped her of even that small defense. A white passenger in a rumpled suit seated in row 10 half stood, his voice shaky as he said, "Hey, that's not right. She's not hurting anyone." But Karen wheeled on him, her face a mask of fury as she barked, "Sit down or you're off too." And he shrank back, his courage evaporating under her glare, leaving Lena alone again, her allies silenced, her options narrowing as Karen shoved her toward a cramped middle seat in row 32, sandwiched between a snoring man and a teenager, blasting music through earbuds, the air thick with the scent of stale pretzels and sweat. Lena slid her bag under the seat, her ribs pressed against the armrests, her merger notes now vulnerable, her phone gone, her dignity shredded in front of a plane full of strangers. And she sat there, her eyes fixed on the seat back ahead, her mind a whirlwind of strategy, knowing this wasn't over, that Karen's smug victory was a spark about to ignite a firestorm she couldn't contain. The plane lurched forward, engines roaring as it climbed into the sky, and Lena's gaze shifted to the window, the sprawl of Los Angeles shrinking below, a city she'd conquered years ago, now a distant memory as she faced this new battlefield, one where the rules were rigged, the players blind, and the stakes higher than anyone realized. Could Karen really think she'd won this round, or was she just a pawn in a game she didn't understand? How deep did this rot go, and what would it take to rip it out by the roots? Hey folks, if you're raging at Karen's power trip, comment #1 down below, because who else thinks she's digging her own grave here? If you're rooting for Lena to turn this mess around, smash that like button and subscribe to catch every twist as she fights back against this garbage. What's coming next, you ask? Will Lena let this slide, or is she about to drop a bomb that'll blow this whole flight apart? Lena Harper sat wedged in the suffocating middle seat of row 32, the plane slicing through the sky at 35,000 feet, the snoring man on her left drooling onto his tray table, while the teenager on her right bobbed his head, to a tinny beat leaking from his earbuds, the air stale and heavy as her ribs ached from the armrests digging in, her mind a furnace of fury and calculation, every second in this cramped purgatory fueling her resolve to turn this humiliation into a reckoning, though her face stayed a mask of icy calm, her eyes fixed on the scratched plastic of the seat back ahead, hiding the storm raging within. Her phone was gone, snatched by Karen Voss, her merger notes tucked in the laptop bag under her feet, vulnerable to prying hands, and she knew she couldn't wait, couldn't let this fester, Not when she had an empire to protect, so she shifted. Her wrist, the sleeve of her blazer sliding back to reveal a sleek smartwatch, its screen glowing faintly as she tapped it with a practiced flick. Her fingers steady despite the chaos around her. Opening an encrypted chat with Marcus, her COO. A man who'd been her right hand since Horizon Airways was just a dream scratched out on a napkin 15 years ago. She typed fast, her message short but sharp. Incident on Flight 732. Racist flight attendant. Took my phone. Moved me to economy. Verify my ticket and alert the board. Now, her thumb hitting send as the plane jolted through a pocket of turbulence. The watch's signal slipping through the satellite link, a lifeline to the world beyond this metal cage. And she leaned back, her breath slow and deliberate, knowing Marcus would move mountains for her, trusting he'd have her back before this. Flight hit New York. The cabin lights dimmed as the drink cart rattled closer, and Lena's ears caught a snippet of conversation from the galley ahead. Karen's voice, low and smug, drifting through the hum of the engines, saying to the twitchy young flight attendant taught her a lesson, thinking she can waltz into first class like she owns it. And the kid chuckled nervously, mumbling something about troublemakers, their words a knife twisting in Lena's gut. Not because they hurt, but because they confirmed what she'd suspected. This wasn't a mistake. It was a deliberate attack, a racist jab from someone too blind to see the irony of her own words. Her pulse quickened, her calm cracking as she unbuckled her seatbelt, the click lost in the cabin's drone, and she stood, her legs stiff from the tight space, her heels sinking into the carpet as she marched toward the galley, her laptop bag slung over her shoulder, her eyes locked on Karen's back, the flight attendant's blonde bun bobbing as she poured a soda. Oblivious to the reckoning closing in, Lena stopped a foot away, her voice cutting through the air like a whip. "I want my phone back now," her tone low but laced with steel. Every word, a demand, not a request. And Karen spun around, her smirk faltering for a split second before hardening into a sneer, her blue eyes glinting with defiance as she stepped closer, saying, "You don't get to make demands here. Sit down before you make this worse." But Lena didn't budge, her stance unyielding, her gaze boring into Karen's, saying, "You've got no right to take my property. Give it back, or I'll escalate this." A threat wrapped in velvet, her mind already plotting the next move, the call she'd make to the FAA if this didn't end here. Karen's sneer twisted into something uglier, and she lunged, her hands shoving Lena's chest, the force sending her stumbling back into the drink cart, metal clattering as cans and cups spilled across the floor, soda splashing onto Lena's slacks, the cold sting soaking through as passengers gasped, heads snapping up from their screens. A woman in row 20 clutching her armrest, a man in a baseball cap muttering, "What the hell?" The cabin erupting in a chorus of shock and murmurs, but no one moved, no one helped, their eyes wide with the kind of curiosity that feeds on chaos. Lena caught herself against the galley counter, her ribs throbbing from the impact, her blazer sticky with cola, and she straightened, her breath ragged, but her resolve ironclad, staring down Karen, who spun the scene like a seasoned liar, pointing at Lena and shouting, "She attacked me, she's out of control," her voice shrill, her face flushed with fake panic, and the young flight attendant froze, his hands trembling as he fumbled for his radio, while the older woman peeked out, her lips pursed, her silence a betrayal of its own. Before Lena could counter, the intercom crackled, Captain Ted's gruff voice booming through the cabin. "Passenger in Economy 32. You're detained for the remainder of this flight. Stay where you are. Crew will handle it." No explanation, no questions, just a command that turned the air thick with tension. And Karen smirked again, her triumph a venomous glow as she grabbed a pair of zip ties from a drawer, striding over to Lena with a predator's gait, saying, "Hands out now, or it gets worse." Her words a taunt, a dare, a promise of more pain to come. Lena's mind raced, her smartwatch buzzing faintly with Marcus's reply, "Ticket confirmed, board notified, hold tight." But it was too late. The damage was done, and she held out her wrists, her eyes never leaving Karen's, her calm a weapon, even as the plastic bit into her skin, tightening with a snap that echoed in the galley. Her arms yanked behind her as Karen shoved her toward a jump seat near the rear exit, the metal frame cold against her back as she sat, restrained, exposed. The passengers' stares a mix of pity and judgment, none of them knowing the truth. none of them seeing the titan beneath the ties. Karen loomed over her, her breath hot and sour as she whispered, "Should have stayed quiet, princess, now you're nobody." Her words a venomous jab, a miscalculation so profound Lena almost laughed. But she didn't. She just sat there, her mind shifting from defense to offense, her body still but her spirit a coiled spring, ready to snap back when the moment was right. The plane leveled off, the turbulence fading, but the storm inside was just beginning. Lena's wrists chafing as she tested the ties, her thoughts on Marcus, on the board, on the empire she'd built, knowing this wasn't the end, that Karen's petty win was a mirage, a spark about to ignite a blaze she couldn't outrun. And as the flight attendant strutted back to the galley, oblivious to the eyes still filming, the whispers still spreading, Lena's resolve hardened. Her counterattack thwarted for now, but the war was far from over, and she'd make damn sure they all paid, every last one of them, for thinking they could break her. Lena Harper sat strapped to the jump seat near the rear exit of Flight 732, the zip ties cutting into her wrists as the plane cruised at 35,000 feet. The hum of the engines a steady roar that drowned out the whispers of passengers still stealing glances, their phones angled discreetly to capture the spectacle of her detainment, her blazer stained with soda, her slacks clinging damply to her legs, her ribs throbbing from the crash into the drink cart. Yet her face remained a fortress of calm, her eyes fixed on the galley ahead, where Karen Voss strutted like a queen who'd just claimed a throne, oblivious to the wildfire she'd sparked, a fire Lena knew would soon consume her. The air in the cabin was thick, heavy with tension and the faint tang of spilled cola, and Lena's smartwatch buzzed faintly against her skin, Marcus's message glowing in her mind. Ticket confirmed, board notified, hold tight. A lifeline she clung to as the plastic restraints chafed her flesh, her body still but her thoughts racing, plotting, waiting for the moment to turn this humiliation into a reckoning. Though the odds felt stacked higher with every passing minute, the jump seat's metal frame digging into her spine, a cold reminder of how far she'd fallen from the first-class seat she'd earned, the empire she'd built, now mocked by a flight attendant too blind to see the truth. Across the aisle, a passenger in a faded hoodie, a wiry guy with a scruffy beard, shifted uncomfortably, his phone trembling in his hands as he filmed, the red dot blinking as he captured Karen's smug grin, Lena's bound wrists, the whole ugly scene unfolding in real time. And within minutes, the video hit X, a single post tagged Iran Horizon Airways scandal, the caption raw and furious. Flight attendant ties up black woman for no reason. This is insane. And the internet erupted retweets, climbing into the thousands, comments flooding with outrage, some calling it racism, others demanding answers. The clip spreading like wildfire across screens from Los Angeles to New York. A digital uprising Lena couldn't see but could feel. The cabin's silence cracking as passengers began murmuring, their voices a low hum of disbelief, a few glancing her way with something like sympathy, though none dared speak up directly, their courage confined to their keyboards. The plane droned on, the altitude steady but the atmosphere shifted, the young flight attendant with the twitchy hands darting nervous looks at Karen, who stood pouring coffee like nothing had happened, her smirk unshaken, her radio clipped to her hip, as if she owned the sky itself, and Lena tested the zip ties again, her wrists raw, her mind on Marcus, praying he'd move fast, knowing the board's muscle could crush this nonsense if they acted now, though doubt gnawed at her, the fear that even her power might not be enough against a system so quick to turn on her. Then the cockpit phone rang, a shrill chime cutting through the cabin, and Karen's head snapped up, her smirk faltering as she strode to answer it, her heels stabbing the carpet, her voice muffled but sharp as she argued with whoever was on the line. And Lena caught fragments, words like identity and mistake, and now, her pulse quickening as she pieced it together. Marcus had gotten through. He'd reached Captain Ted, and the pilot's gruff voice crackled over the intercom moments later. "Attention crew, release the passenger in 32. Immediately. Situation's cleared. No explanation. Just a command that hit Karen like a slap, her face twisting into a mask of fury as she slammed the phone down, her blue eyes blazing with defiance. Though she couldn't defy the order. Not yet. She stormed back to Lena, her hands shaking as she pulled a pair of scissors from her apron, snapping, "You got lucky. Don't think this changes anything." And she cut the zip ties, her grip rough, the blade slicing too close, nicking Lena's wrist, a thin line of blood welling up. The sting sharp and sudden as crimson dripped onto her lap, and Karen smirked again, whispering, "Oops, guess I'm clumsy." Her voice a venomous taunt, a promise of more to come. Though Lena didn't flinch, didn't give her the satisfaction, just rubbed her wrists, her calm unshaken, her eyes locking onto Karen's with a silent vow that this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The passengers erupted in applause, a ragged cheer rippling through the cabin, the guy in the hoodie pumping his fist, the woman in row 20 clapping softly, a wave of relief washing over them as Lena stood, her legs stiff, but her posture regal, her laptop bag reclaimed as she walked back to first class, her heels clicking with purpose, her head high despite the blood trickling down her hand, the soda drying sticky on her clothes, and she sank into 2A again. Her phone returned by the twitchy flight attendant, who mumbled an apology she ignored, her focus shifting to the screen. Marcus's text glowing, "You're clear, board's pissed, we've got your back." And she exhaled, a flicker of triumph, warming her chest, thinking she'd regained control. That justice had tipped the scales, if only for a moment. She pulled out her merger notes, her pen scratching across the page, the numbers steadying her as the plane soared on, the cabin settling into an uneasy calm. Passengers returning to their screens, their snacks, their lives, assuming the drama was done. The villain humbled, the hero restored, but Lena knew better, her instinct screaming that this wasn't the end, that Karen's fury wasn't spent, and as she glanced toward the galley, she caught the flight attendant whispering to Ted through the cockpit door, her voice too low to hear, her posture tense, her head shaking, and Lena's gut twisted, a chill creeping up her spine as Karen turned, their eyes meeting across the cabin, a flash of malice in those blue depths, a hissed promise cutting through the distance. She won't get away with this. And Lena's triumph curdled, her victory hollow, the blood on her wrist a warning, a mark of a war that was only beginning, a war she'd win, yes, but at what cost, with what scars, against an enemy who'd already shown she'd stop at nothing to bury her. The plane flew on, the clouds rolling past the window, serene and oblivious, but inside, the storm was brewing. Karen's whisper a fuse lit and burning, and Lena braced herself, her pen still, her mind racing, knowing the next blow would be worse, harder, deadlier. And she'd have to be ready because if Karen wanted to play dirty, she'd learn soon enough that Lena Harper played dirtier, and she never, ever lost. Lena Harper sat back in her first-class seat, 2A, the leather cool against her sticky blazer as the plane hummed through the night sky, her wrist stinging where Karen Voss had sliced it, a thin trickle of blood drying into a crusty line she dabbed. With a napkin, her merger notes spread across the tray table, her pen scratching numbers as she tried to refocus, to reclaim the control she'd fought for. Though her ribs ached from the earlier crash into the cart, her pulse still thrumming with the adrenaline of her release, the passenger cheers still echoing in her ears, a fragile triumph she knew wouldn't last, not with Karen's whispered threat hanging in the air like smoke, a promise of something darker, something she couldn't yet see but could feel, heavy and inevitable. The cabin lights flickered as the plane hit a patch of turbulence, the soft clink of glasses and murmurs of passengers, a deceptive lull. And Lena glanced toward the galley, catching Karen's silhouette pacing, her blonde bun tight and severe, her hands fidgeting with her radio, her eyes darting toward the cockpit, and Lena's gut twisted, knowing that smirk wasn't gone. It was just biding its time, sharpening its claws for the next strike, a strike she'd have to be ready for, though her smartwatch lay silent now. Marcus's last message her only anchor, "Board's pissed, we've got your back," a lifeline stretched thin across the miles. Karen slipped her phone from her apron pocket, her fingers flying across the screen, her lips curling into a snarl as she typed, and Lena squinted, trying to read her, to guess the move. But the distance blurred the details, leaving only the certainty that this wasn't over, that the flight attendant's fury had roots deeper than a bruised ego, roots that reached somewhere Lena couldn't yet touch. Down in the belly of Horizon Airways' corporate machine, Karen's text landed in the inbox of her uncle, Richard Voss, a 58-year-old vice president with a corner office in Dallas, a man whose slick suits and silver hair hid a career, built on burying scandals, his desk littered with files of hushed-up complaints, his phone buzzing as he read her message. Some black chicks making trouble on 732, Got her off first class, but she's back. Went viral. Fix this. And his jaw tightened, his thick fingers drumming the oak as he dialed Ted, the pilot, his voice a low growl when it connected. Fake a mechanical issue. Land in Denver. Now, no questions. His authority a sledgehammer. His niece's petty grudge a spark he'd turn into a blaze. Because if Lena Harper thought she'd won, she'd learn soon enough that Richard Voss didn't lose, not to anyone, especially not to her. The plane shuddered, a sudden jolt that snapped Lena's pen from her hand, ink smearing across her notes as the intercom crackled. Ted's voice booming. Folks, we've got a minor engine glitch. Diverting to Denver for safety. Sit tight. His tone clipped, rehearsed, and Lena's eyes narrowed, her instincts screaming this wasn't random, not after Karen's whisper, not after the zip ties, not after the blood. And she glanced at the flight attendant, catching her smirk widen, a flash of triumph that confirmed it. This was no glitch. It was a trap, a setup she'd walked right into, her victory snatched away before the ink could dry. The descent came fast, the plane tilting as it dropped toward Denver International, the cabin lights flaring bright, passengers groaning, some clutching armrests, others muttering about delays. But Lena stayed still, her mind racing, her merger, notes stuffed back into her bag, her wrist throbbing as she pieced it together, knowing Karen had pulled strings, though how high they reached she couldn't guess. Not yet. Not until the wheels hit the tarmac with a jolt that rattled her teeth. The plane taxiing to a remote hangar, far from the main terminal. A spot too quiet, too isolated, too perfect for what came next. The doors hissed open and Karen strode down the aisle, her radio crackling as she barked, "Everyone stay seated, we've got a security issue." Her eyes locking onto Lena's, her voice rising as she pointed. She started a riot, spilled drinks, on purpose. She's dangerous. A lie so bold it stunned the cabin into silence. Passengers gaping. The guy in the hoodie shaking his head. The woman in row 20 whispering no way, but no one spoke up. Their earlier cheers forgotten. Their phones stilled as 4 airport security guards stormed aboard. Burly men in black vests, their faces hard, their badges glinting under the lights. Cronies Lena didn't recognize but knew weren't random. Their hands rough as they grabbed her arms, yanking her from her seat, her bag slipping to the floor as they cuffed her, metal biting deeper than the zip ties, her wrist bleeding anew as they dragged her down the aisle, her heels scraping the carpet, her voice steady despite the pain. "You're making a mistake. Check my ID." But they didn't listen, didn't care. Their grips tightening as Karen smirked, saying, "Take her away, she's a threat." Her words a venomous script, a performance rehearsed and perfected. Passengers watched, stunned, some filming again, others turning away. The cabin a mix of shock and cowardice as Lena was hauled off the plane, the cold Denver air hitting her face like a slap, the hangar looming dark and empty, the guards shoving her toward a holding cell, a concrete box with a single flickering bulb, her bag confiscated, her merger notes rifled through as evidence. The door slamming shut with a clang that echoed in her skull, her body bruised, her blood dripping onto the floor, her empire slipping through her fingers, and she sat there, her back against the wall, her breath shallow, her mind a storm of rage and strategy. Knowing this wasn't just Karen anymore. This was bigger, orchestrated, a power play from someone with pull, someone who'd kill to keep her down. She traced the cut on her wrist, the pain grounding her resolve hardening as she whispered to herself, "They'll pay, every last one," because if they thought this cell would break her, they'd learn soon enough that Lena Harper didn't bend, didn't bow, didn't lose, not even locked in a cage, not even bleeding, not even alone. Hey, if you're screaming at Karen's dirty move, comment number 1 below, because who else thinks she's crossed a line she can't come back from? If you're furious at this rigged system piling on Lena, smash that like button and subscribe to see her fight back against these snakes. Was this Richard's masterstroke, or is there an even nastier twist waiting to drop? Lena Harper sat on the cold concrete floor of the Denver airport holding cell, her back pressed against the rough wall, her wrist oozing blood from Karen Voss's earlier slice, the sting a dull pulse under the flickering bulb overhead, her blazer torn at the elbow, her slack stiff with dried soda, her ribs aching from the guard's rough handling, yet her mind burned with a clarity sharper than the pain. a resolve forged in the fire of this latest injustice, knowing she wasn't just locked in a cage but trapped in a war she'd win. Though the cost was mounting, the bruises on her arms and the stolen merger notes a tally she'd make them pay for, every last one of them, starting now. The cell was a tomb, silent except for the drip of a leaky pipe in the corner, the air thick with mildew and despair, and Lena's eyes scanned the space, landing on a rusted nail jutting from the wall, a glimmer of possibility in the gloom. But before she could reach for it, footsteps echoed outside, slow and shuffling. A janitor in a faded jumpsuit pushing a mop, his gray hair peeking from a cap, his face weathered but kind, and she recognized him. A flicker of memory from the viral video's comments, a fan who'd called her a queen, a stranger who might just be her way out. She tore a strip from her blazer's lining, her fingers trembling as she grabbed the nail, scratching a coded message into the fabric. Board alerted. Get Marcus, Horizon HQ, urgent. Her handwriting jagged but legible, and when the janitor passed the barred window, she slipped it through, her voice a whisper. Please, get this to someone. Anyone. Her eyes locking onto his, a plea wrapped in command. And he nodded, tucking it into his pocket with a glance over his shoulder, disappearing into the shadows as her heart thudded. Hope, a fragile thread stretched across the miles to Marcus, her rock, her army, the man who'd turned this cell into a stepping stone. Hours crawled by, the bulb buzzing, her blood crusting on the floor, and Lena sat still, her breath steady, her mind replaying every move, Karen's smirk, Ted's complicity, the guard's brutality, knowing this wasn't random, that Richard Voss's shadow loomed somewhere above, a puppet master she'd unmask soon enough. Though doubt gnawed at her, the fear that even Marcus might not reach her in time, that the merger, her empire, might slip away in this concrete box. But she shoved it down, her will a steel rod holding her upright, her body battered but her spirit unbowed. Then came the roar, a commotion beyond the cell, voices shouting, footsteps pounding, and the door flew open. Marcus storming in, his broad frame filling the space, his suit rumpled from a red-eye flight, his dark eyes blazing with fury as he barked at the guards, "You've got no grounds. Release her now. Legal's here." Backed by two Horizon lawyers in crisp ties, their briefcases snapping open to reveal warrants, footage, a tidal wave of evidence that hit the guards like a freight train, and they fumbled with the cuffs, metal clanking as they freed her, their faces pale, their bravado crumbling under Marcus's glare. Though Lena stood slowly, her legs wobbly, her wrist throbbing, her dignity intact as she smoothed her torn blazer, her voice low. "You'll regret this. A promise, not a threat." Her eyes burning into theirs as she stepped out, free but not finished, not by a long shot. The airport buzzed outside, news vans circling the hangar, cameras flashing as Marcus ushered her into the chaos, his arm around her shoulders, whispering, "We've got the fake landing on tape. It's live." Ted screwed, and Lena nodded, her mind shifting to offense, her smartwatch buzzing with texts from the board, outrage boiling over. And she strode toward a makeshift podium, reporters shoving mics in her face, her voice steady despite the bruises as she spoke. "Horizon Airways let a racist crew frame me, lock me up, but I'm not the victim here they are for thinking they could bury me." Her words a blade, slicing through the lies, the viral video looping on screens behind her, Karen's smirk, the zip ties, the blood, now broadcast coast to coast, a public execution of their arrogance, and the crowd roared, some cheering, others stunned. Her triumph a beacon, a signal she'd turned the tide, or so she thought. She limped back to Marcus, her ribs screaming, her merger notes still gone, but her spirit soaring as he said, "Richard's on the ropes, boards digging will sue them into the ground." And she smiled, faint but fierce, imagining Karen's face when the hammer fell, picturing Ted's panic, tasting victory as they boarded a private jet to New York, the commercial flight abandoned, her path clear, her power flexing, and she sank into the seat, her eyes closing for a moment, thinking she'd won, that the worst was behind her, that justice was hers, until Marcus's phone rang, his face darkening as he listened, muttering, "Richard's not done. He's fighting back." And Lena's eyes snapped open, her heart sinking, her victory a mirage, a flicker of light before the plunge, because as the jet taxied, she caught a glimpse of Richard's face on a news feed, his silver hair gleaming, his voice smooth as he denied it all, his eyes glinting with a promise of his own. "Fix this now," echoing Karen's whisper. And Lena knew this wasn't the end. It was a trap snapping shut, a setup for something worse, something she'd have to face on the next flight. Her body bruised, her empire teetering, her resolve the only thing holding her together as the jet lifted off. The sky ahead dark and treacherous, a battlefield she'd have to conquer all over again. Lena Harper settled into the plush seat of the private jet Marcus had chartered from Denver to New York. The cabin quiet except for the soft whine of the engines as they climbed into the night sky. Her torn blazer draped over her shoulders, her wrist bandaged hastily by a medic before takeoff. The sting of the cut a dull ache under the gauze, her ribs pulsing with pain from the airport guard's brutality. Yet her mind buzzed with a mix of exhaustion and defiance. Her merger notes still missing, her empire teetering, but her resolve a steel core holding her upright. The taste of her press conference victory still sharp on her tongue, though Richard Voss's shadowed threat lingered like a storm cloud. A warning she couldn't shake as the jet leveled off at 30,000 feet. The city lights below a distant glimmer of the world she'd conquer again, no matter the cost. Marcus sat across from her, his broad frame hunched over his phone, his dark eyes scanning updates from the board, muttering, "Richard's suspended, Karen's grounded, we've got them." His voice a lifeline she clung to, though her gut screamed it wasn't over, that the smug flight attendant and her uncle had more venom to spill. And she nodded, her fingers tracing the bandage. Her thoughts on the next move, the merger meeting now hours away, her empire's future hinging on her strength, her will, her survival. The jet wasn't Horizon's, a last-minute rental to dodge the chaos of Flight 732, and Lena had insisted on a new crew, no familiar faces, no risks. But when the connecting flight boarded in Chicago for the final leg, her stomach dropped. Karen Voss stepping aboard, her blonde bun pristine, her uniform crisp, her smirk ablaze as she locked eyes with Lena, saying, "Surprise, they couldn't keep me off," her voice dripping with malice, her presence a slap, a violation of the board's orders, and Lena's pulse spiked, her smartwatch buzzing with a text from Marcus, who'd stayed behind to handle legal. Richard pulled strings. Watch her. A warning too late as the jet door sealed shut, trapping her with the enemy she'd underestimated. A predator who'd slipped every leash. The flight took off smooth, the cabin dimming as passengers, a mix of suits and weary travelers, settled in. But Lena stayed alert, her seat in first class a battlefield now, her eyes tracking Karen as the flight attendant moved with purpose, her hands brushing the galley counter, her smirk widening as she locked the first-class bathroom door with a click. A move Lena clocked instantly, her instincts screaming trap, though she brushed it off, needing a moment to breathe, to wash the blood and soda from her skin. So she stood, her ribs protesting, and slipped inside before takeoff. The lock clicking. Behind her, the tiny space a brief sanctuary, or so she thought. Minutes later, the jet hit turbulence. A violent jolt that slammed Lena against the sink, the edge cracking into her side. A gasp ripping from her throat as pain exploded through her torso, her ribs snapping under the force, the plane bucking, again, tossing her into the wall, her head smacking the mirror, a spiderweb of cracks blooming as blood trickled down her temple, and she clutched the counter, her breath ragged, her mind racing. This wasn't natural, not this rough, not this sudden. And she pounded the door, her fists weak against the metal, her voice hoarse, "Let me out now." But no one came, the turbulence a weapon, a calculated assault she couldn't escape, her body trapped, her empire slipping as the jet shook, a death trap rigged just for her. Outside, Karen stood by the galley, her smirk a mask of innocence as she shrugged at a passenger's question, saying, "Routine maintenance? Bathroom's out." Her voice calm, her eyes glinting with glee as Lena's muffled cries leaked through the door. The sound a symphony to her, a victory she'd savor. Though a doctor in row 8, a wiry man with gray hair, stood, his face tight with alarm, shouting, "Someone's in there. Open it. She's hurt." His hands fumbling for his bag, but Karen wheeled on him, her tone icy. "Sit down. She's a terrorist. Aiding her's a crime." Her lie a grenade, the cabin freezing, passengers gaping, the doctor hesitating, his courage faltering under her glare. And Lena's fists slowed, her strength fading, her ribs afire that stole her breath, her blood smearing the sink, her mind clawing for a way out, knowing this wasn't just racism now. It was murder, a hit ordered by someone with power, someone who'd kill to silence her. The jet steadied, the turbulence easing, but Lena's prison held, the lock unyielding, her body slumping against the wall, her vision blurring as she pounded again. Weaker now, her voice a rasp. "Help me, please." And she heard footsteps, the doctor arguing, Karen snapping, but it faded, her ears ringing. Her hope a thread stretched to breaking, until Richard's voice crackled over the radio, faint but clear through the door. "Divert to Springfield, armed teams waiting, finish her," his words a death sentence, a confirmation of the puppet master she'd suspected, his pull deeper than she'd feared. His niece the executioner, the jet banking hard as it dropped toward a small airstrip, a nowhere town in Illinois, a kill zone she'd never reach alive if they had their way. Lena slid to the floor, her ribs screaming, her blood pooling, her mind racing despite the haze, knowing she had seconds, minutes at best. Her smartwatch dead, her phone gone, her allies miles away, and she clawed at the lock, her nails bending, her will the only weapon left. Because if Karen and Richard thought this would end her, they'd learn soon enough that Lena Harper didn't die easy. Not locked in a bathroom, not bleeding out, not when her empire, her legacy, her fight hung in the balance. And as the jet descended, the wheels screeching on the tarmac, she braced herself, her breath shallow, her eyes burning, ready for the next blow, knowing it was coming, knowing it'd be worse, knowing she'd have to survive it, no matter what. Lena Harper slumped against the bathroom wall of the private jet, her breath shallow, her cracked ribs a searing cage around her lungs as blood trickled from her temple, pooling on the floor beside her torn blazer, the turbulence having battered her body into submission, the locked door an unyielding barrier between her and survival. Her smartwatch dark, her strength fading, yet her mind clung to a single thread of defiance, a refusal to let Karen Voss and Richard Voss snuff her out. Not here, not now, not when Horizon Airways, her empire, hung in the balance. A legacy she'd bled for, a fight she'd finish, no matter the cost. Though the jet's descent to Springfield's tiny airstrip signaled a grim end, Richard's armed team waiting below, their orders clear, her death a certainty unless someone, broke through. The plane jolted as it landed, wheels screeching on the cracked tarmac, and Lena's ears caught muffled shouts beyond the door, chaos brewing in the cabin, her fists pounding weakly against the metal, her voice a rasp. "Help me. Get me out." A plea swallowed by the hum of the engines winding down, until a loud crack split the air, the lock splintering as the gray-haired doctor from row 8 rammed his shoulder into the door, his face flushed with fury, his medical bag swinging as he yelled, "She's dying in there, move!" His courage finally breaking free, shoving past Karen, who stumbled back, her smirk vanishing, her hands flailing as she screeched, "Stop him, he's—" aiding her. But the passengers erupted, a wave of outrage crashing over her, a woman in a red coat leaping up shouting, "Enough, let her go!" Others joining, their phones flashing, filming, a revolt sparked by the doctor's defiance. A tide Karen couldn't hold back. The door burst open, Lena spilling out, her legs buckling, her blood streaking the floor as the doctor caught her, his hands steady, his voice urgent. "Stay with me, I've got you." While passengers swarmed Karen, pinning her arms, their voices a roar, she locked her in. She's a monster, the cabin a battlefield, the jet shuddering as the pilot, a new face not Ted, slammed the brakes, his intercom crackling. Everyone calmed down. "We're landing." But it was too late. The mutiny was alive. Lena's life the spark, her pain the fuel, and she gasped, her vision swimming, her ribs screaming, knowing she'd been saved if only for a moment. The jet stopped, doors hissing open, and paramedics rushed aboard, their boots pounding as they lifted Lena onto a stretcher, her body limp, her eyes flickering to Karen, who stood cuffed by passengers, her face a mask of rage, her blonde bun askew, her uniform wrinkled. A fallen tyrant, and Lena's lips twitched, a faint triumph cutting through the haze as sirens wailed outside. The Springfield airstrip swarming with cops, news vans, a circus she'd ignited, though Richard's armed team melted into the shadows, their plan thwarted. their boss's voice silent on the radio. A retreat she knew wouldn't last. Hours later, Lena woke in a Chicago hospital, IVs snaking into her arm, her ribs taped, her head bandaged, the sterile white room a stark contrast to the jet's chaos. Marcus bursting through the door, his suit rumpled, his eyes wild as he thrust. A tablet at her saying, "We've got Richard's orders, audio from the cockpit, he's done." His voice a lifeline, proof of the VP's hit in grainy black and white, and Lena nodded, her throat dry, her mind sharpening, knowing this was her shot, her kill, her empire's salvation. So she sat up, pain be damned, and demanded a press conference, right here, right now. Her voice a blade, her will unbroken. Cameras rolled, mics crowding her bed, her face bruised but fierce as she spoke. Horizon Airways tried to kill me. Richard Voss ordered it. Karen Voss executed it. This is racism with a gun, and I'm still standing. Her words a thunderclap, the audio playing behind her, Richard's growl, finish her, echoing on national news. The board's response swift, texts flooding Marcus's phone, Richard suspended. Karen's fired, investigation launched, and Lena exhaled, her chest tight, her victory ringing, thinking she'd crushed them. The crowd outside chanting her name, justice a beacon, a crown she'd reclaimed, until the door burst open again. Marcus's face paling as he whispered, "Richard's men. They're here," guns drawn, and the room darkened, power cutting out, screams echoing down the hall, her triumph a mirage, a heartbeat before the plunge, because as shadows moved outside, Lena knew this wasn't the end. It was a war reignited, a fight she'd have to survive. Again. Hey, if you're cheering the passengers who finally stood up, comment number 1 below, because who else thinks they turned the tide just in time? If you're boiling at Karen's murder plot, smash that like button and subscribe to see Lena take these monsters down. Was this her big win, or has Richard's next move already checkmated her? Lena Harper lay in her Chicago hospital bed, the IV dripping steadily into her arm, her bandaged ribs a tight cage around her labored breaths as the room plunged into darkness. The power cut a deafening silence broken only by Marcus's urgent whisper. "Richard's men, they're here." Guns drawn, his words a jolt that snapped her eyes wide. The press conference's triumph dissolving into terror. The crowd's chants outside fading under the staccato of boots echoing down the hall. Her body bruised, her head throbbing from the jet's bathroom trap. Yet her mind raced, adrenaline surging as she yanked the IV free, blood trickling from the puncture, her resolve a steel wire pulling her upright, knowing Richard Voss wouldn't let her win, not after she'd exposed his kill order. Not when her survival threatened his empire within her empire. A war she'd fight to the last breath, no matter the odds stacked against her now. The door rattled, shadows shifting under the crack, and Marcus lunged for a chair, wedging it under the handle, his broad frame trembling as he hissed, "We've got seconds. Move." His phone useless, signals jammed by Richard's goons, a paramilitary squad in black tactical gear, their walkie-talkies crackling with slurs. "She's in there, take her out." Their voices a venomous chorus that chilled Lena's blood, her ribs screaming as she swung her legs off the bed, her bare feet hitting the cold tile, her hospital gown flapping as she staggered toward a supply closet, Marcus shoving a cart behind her, a flimsy barricade against the storm breaking through. She ducked inside, the door clicking shut, her breath ragged as she scanned the shelves, bandages, syringes, a scalpel glinting in the dim emergency light, her fingers closing around it, a weapon born of desperation, her mind flashing to the jet, the cell, the bathroom, every trap she'd survived, every scar she'd earned, and she gripped the blade, her wrist still raw from Karen's cut, her body a map of pain, but her will a furnace, burning hotter as shouts erupted outside, Marcus yelling, "Stay back!" His voice cracking as a gunshot split the air, a thud hitting the floor, her heart seizing. Marcus, no. Her rock, her shield, gone, or so she feared. The closet a coffin if she didn't move, didn't fight, didn't live. The door splintered, a boot kicking through, and Lena acted, slashing a roll of gauze into strips, rigging it across the threshold, her hands shaking as she tied it taut, the scalpel slicing her palm, blood slicking her grip, a trap set in seconds. As the first goon burst in, his gun raised, his face a sneer under a balaclava. "Nigger's done," he spat, But his foot caught the gauze, tripping him forward, his head cracking against a metal shelf, a sickening crunch as he crumpled, his gun skittering across the floor. And Lena dove for it, her ribs howling, her fingers closing around the grip. Her breath a hiss as she rolled behind a cart, the second guard charging in, his rifle spraying, bullets shredding the shelves, gauze and plaster raining down as she fired, a wild shot that grazed his leg, his scream a raw bellow as he stumbled, giving her a heartbeat to crawl, her gown snagging, her blood trailing, her eyes locked on the window, a sliver of freedom 3 floors up, a drop she'd risk if it meant surviving this hell. She hauled herself up, the glass cool against her palm as she smashed it with the gun's butt, shards slicing her arm, the night air rushing in, sharp and bitter. The parking lot below a blur of flashing cop cars. Too far. Too late. And she climbed onto the sill, her legs trembling, her ribs afire that stole her breath. The third guard bursting in, his rifle aimed, his voice a growl. "You're dead, bitch." But she jumped, the wind whipping her gown, her body tumbling, crashing into a dumpster, metal buckling under her weight, pain exploding through her spine, her vision blackening. Yet she rolled out, alive, barely. Her scalpel still clutched, her blood soaking the pavement as she staggered to her feet. The hospital a war zone behind her, sirens wailing, Richard's men retreating, their siege a failure, or so she thought. She limped toward a shadowed corner, her breath a wheeze, her mind on Marcus, praying he'd survived, when headlights flared, a stolen ambulance screeching toward her. Karen Voss at the wheel, her blonde bun wild, her eyes manic, her smirk a death mask as she floored it, the bumper slamming into Lena's side, hurling her back into the dumpster, metal crunching, her ribs shattering anew, her scream lost in the roar of the engine, her body crumpling, her scalpel skittering away. Her victory a lie, a heartbeat from oblivion as Karen laughed, a cackle cutting through the night. "You thought you'd win, princess." Her voice a venomous lash, a promise fulfilled. Richard's final blow, or so it seemed, because Lena's eyes fluttered, her blood pooling, her will flickering yet burning. A spark refusing to die. A fight she'd claw back from no matter how broken, no matter how close to the edge, because if Karen thought this was the end, she'd learn soon enough that Lena Harper didn't break. Not even bleeding. Not even betrayed. Not even now. Lena Harper lay crumpled against the dumpster in the Chicago hospital parking lot, her body a wreckage of shattered ribs and bleeding cuts. The stolen ambulance's impact a thunderclap still ringing in her ears as Karen Voss gunned the engine, her manic laughter slicing through the night, the headlights blinding as the vehicle lurched. Pinned under its own wreckage after swerving into a ditch, metal groaning as it settled, Karen trapped inside, her blonde bun a tangle, her smirk gone, her arm twisted at an unnatural angle, blood seeping from a gash on her forehead. Yet her eyes still burned with hate, glaring at Lena through the cracked windshield, a vow of vengeance unspoken but palpable, a promise that this wasn't over, not for her, not yet. Lena's breath came in shallow gasps, her gown soaked with blood and sweat, her scalpel lost in the chaos, her ribs a furnace of agony as she dragged herself upright, her vision swimming, her legs trembling, the cold pavement biting her bare feet, and she staggered away, her mind a haze of pain and survival, the wail of sirens growing louder, red and blue lights flashing as cop cars screeched into the lot, bystanders rushing from the shadows, their phones out, filming, shouting, "She's alive, get help." A lifeline she barely registered, her body screaming to collapse, her will the only thread holding her together, a spark refusing to die because if Karen thought this crash would finish her, she'd learned soon enough that Lena Harper didn't break, not even now, not even like this. The ambulance smoked, its horn blaring a dying wail as cops swarmed, pulling Karen from the wreckage, her wrists cuffed despite her shrieks. "You don't know who I am. She's the liar." Her voice a venomous rant, slurs spilling as cameras caught every word, live streams exploding across X. Karen crashes trending in minutes, her racist meltdown a public execution. And Lena sank to her knees, a paramedic rushing over, his hands gentle as he lifted her onto a stretcher, her blood staining his gloves, his voice urgent, "Stay with me. We've got you." And she nodded, her eyes fluttering, her mind clinging to the chaos, knowing this was a win. A brutal, costly win, though the price was etched in her broken body, her stolen notes, her empire's edge. Airlifted to New York, the chopper's blades thumped above, her ribs taped, her head bandaged, IVs pumping life back into her veins, and she woke in a sterile room, Marcus at her side, alive, his shoulder wrapped from the hospital gunshot, his face etched with relief as he said, "Board's fired, Richard, they're giving you full control. Clean house." His words a crown, a scepter, a burden, and she gripped his hand, her voice a rasp. "We've got them." Her merger lost, but her airline, hers. A victory carved from blood and bone. One she'd wield to bury every last traitor, starting with the Vosses. Or so she thought. Hours later, she faced the cameras again. A wheelchair now, her face bruised but fierce. Her speech viral in minutes. "Horizon Airways is mine. Richard Voss tried to kill me. Karen Voss drove the ambulance. They're done. Corruption's out." Her voice a blade cutting through the lies, the crowd roaring outside. Justice a banner, her power a beacon, and the board's texts flooded in. "We're with you. Rebuild." The merger tanked. Billions lost, but control hers. A Pyrrhic win. A throne reclaimed until Marcus's phone buzzed. His face paling as he showed her a new video. Richard's work. Doctored footage from the jet. Lena slamming the cart, yelling at Karen. A terrorist in a blazer. Lies spun so tight the internet swallowed them whole. Lena lies trending. Public. Opinion flipping overnight, her victory a mirage. Her crown a target because as she sat there, her ribs throbbing. Her empire hers but hated. She knew Richard wasn't done. Not even fired. Not even caged. His revenge a poison spreading fast. A blow she'd have to counter. Broken or not. Because if they thought this would silence her, they'd learn soon. Enough that Lena Harper didn't bow, didn't bend, didn't lose. Not even now, not even bleeding, not even vilified. Lena Harper sat in a wheelchair in a New York safe house, her ribs taped tight, her face a map of bruises under the dim glow of a single lamp. The sterile hospital room swapped for this concrete bunker after Richard Voss's doctored video turned, the public against her. Lena Lee's trending like wildfire. Her empire hers but despised, her merger gone, her victory a hollow shell. Yet her mind burned with strategy, her smartwatch buzzing with Marcus's updates, boards holding. We're digging into Richard, her lifeline as she traced the bandage on her wrist. The cut from Karen's scissors a scar among many, her body broken but her will a furnace, knowing the war wasn't over, that Richard's smear was a prelude, a feint before the kill, and she'd be ready, or so she thought, until Marcus's phone rang, his face paling as he listened, muttering, "They've flipped, the boards flipped," and her heart sank, her empire's foundation cracking, a betrayal she hadn't seen coming. Not yet, not like this. He showed her the text, board to Richard. "We're reinstating you. Stabilize Horizon. She's too volatile." A knife in her back, her own people selling her out, scared of her power, her truth, her skin, and she gripped the armrests, her ribs, screaming, her voice a rasp. "They can't. I own it." But Marcus shook his head. "They've got lawyers, loopholes. Richard's pull, his words a hammer, her throne stolen by cowards, her fight mocked by the men she'd trusted, and she stood, wobbly but fierce, saying, 'Get me to HQ now.'" Her mind on the recording, the proof she'd need, because if they thought she'd fade, they'd learn soon enough that Lena Harper didn't. Vanished, didn't yield, didn't lose, not even stabbed in the back. The drive was tense, Marcus weaving through traffic, her gown swapped for a borrowed coat, her breath shallow as night fell, the city a blur of lights and shadows, until they reached the safe house lot, and headlights flared, a mob surging from the dark. Karen Voss at the helm, freed by a crooked judge, her blonde bun wild, her eyes manic, a torch in her hand, her voice a shriek. "Burn her out. She's a liar." A dozen figures behind her, bottles shattering, flames licking the concrete as the safe house erupted, fire swallowing the walls, glass exploding, and Lena dove from the car, her ribs ablaze, her coat singeing as Marcus pulled her back, yelling, "Run, go," his arm bleeding from a shard, her lungs choking on smoke, her empire's betrayal a spark to this inferno, a mob fueled by Richard's lies, Karen's hate, a vengeance she'd barely escaped, crawling through ash, her blood mixing with soot, her will a thread stretched to snapping, She stumbled to an alley, flames roaring behind, Marcus dragging her, his phone lost, her smartwatch cracked, and they reached Horizon HQ, the glass tower looming, her last stand, her breath a wheeze as she stormed inside, security parting, her coat charred, her eyes blazing straight to Richard's office. The VP reinstated, his silver hair gleaming under fluorescent lights, his smirk a mirror of Karen's as he stood saying, "You're done, Lena. Public hates you, board's mine." His voice silk over steel. His victory a gloat she'd end, her hand slipping to her pocket, a recorder from Marcus clicking on, her voice steady despite the pain. "You ordered my death, framed me, admit it." And he laughed, leaning in, saying, "Yeah, I did. You don't belong here. Never did." His confession a gift, a noose. Her trap sprung as sirens wailed outside, cops bursting in, guns drawn, his face twisting as they cuffed him, mid-gloat, his empire crumbling, her win a heartbeat from complete, until a crack split the air, a sniper's bullet grazing her skull. Karen on the rooftop, her rifle smoking, her scream echoing, "You'll never win." A final blow, a near-fatal strike, and Lena fell, blood pooling, her vision fading, her recorder rolling, her empire hers. But at what cost? Because if they thought this would silence her, they'd learn soon enough that Lena Harper didn't die. Didn't stop, didn't lose, not even now. Not even shot, not even betrayed. Lena Harper woke in a New York hospital, her skull pounding where Karen Voss's sniper bullet had grazed her. A thin bandage wrapping her head, her ribs a taped cage of agony, her body a tapestry of scars from the jet, the cell, the ambulance, the safe house fire. Yet her eyes fluttered open, alive, defiant. The sterile room humming with machines as Marcus hovered nearby, his shoulder still bandaged from the hospital siege, his face a mix of relief and exhaustion as he whispered, "You made it, Richards. Done. Cops got him." His voice a lifeline, her recorder clutched in his hand. Richards' confession, "Yeah, I did. You don't belong here." A noose that had tightened around the VP's neck, his arrest a victory etched in her blood. Though the cost weighed heavy, her merger gone, billions lost, her empire hers but battered. A crown reclaimed through a war she'd barely survived. She shifted, pain lancing through her, and Marcus added, "Karen's dead, shot herself on the rooftop, bullet ricocheted, her own hate took her out." A twist that hit Lena like a punch, the flight attendant's final act a backfire, her rifle's echo silenced, her blonde bun a memory, her malice a boomerang that ended her, and Lena exhaled, a faint smirk tugging her cracked lips. Justice a bitter gift, a foe felled by her own hand. Though the board's betrayal still stung, their reinstatement of Richard a wound deeper than the bullet, deeper than the flames, and Marcus's next words cut sharper. "They're out, all of them. New board's yours, but the merger's toast. We're bleeding cash, her empire hers. Yes, but hollowed. A Pyrrhic win, a throne atop a ruin. She'd have to rebuild brick by bloody brick." She nodded, her throat dry, her mind shifting to the press podium waiting outside. Her final move, her voice a rasp as she said, "Get me there. Now." And Marcus wheeled her out, her coat draped over her gown, her steps a limp, her head high despite the scars, the crowd parting, cameras flashing as she gripped the mic, her words a thunderclap. "Horizon Airways is mine," Richard confessed. "Karen's dead, I survived, and I'll rebuild, not just this airline, but a world where no one's judged by skin. Here's the proof." The recorder playing, his voice damning him. "Yeah, I did. You don't belong." The crowd roaring, some cheering, others stunned. Her vow a beacon, a promise to rise from the ashes. Her empire's losses a scar, her survival a weapon, a lesson carved in blood and fire. Though her eyes darkened, resolve hardening, because this wasn't the end, not yet. Not when her smartwatch buzzed, a text from an unknown number, "You'll pay for this." A shadow stretching beyond Richard, beyond Karen, a new enemy lurking, unseen, unbowed, a war unfinished. She stepped off the podium, the crowd's roar a tide, her body trembling, her blood still seeping through the gauze, and Marcus caught her arm, whispering, "We'll find them, whoever it is." But she shook her head, her voice low, "They'll find me and I'll be ready." Her gaze fixed on the horizon, the city a battlefield she'd conquered, a throne she'd reclaimed. Though the cost was etched in her flesh, her fortune, her future. Billions gone, allies lost, enemies dead, and more rising. A cycle she'd break or die trying, because if they thought this would stop her, they'd learn soon enough that Lena Harper didn't falter, didn't fade, didn't lose. Not even now, not even scarred, not even threatened. Her war a flame that burned on, relentless, eternal, a fight she'd wage until the end, whenever, wherever it came. Lena Harper's harrowing journey in Flight Attendant tells black woman to stand, not knowing she owns the airline, offers raw, unfiltered lessons about resilience, power, and the fight against systemic racism. First, it shows that strength isn't just physical, it's mental, a refusal to break even when the world bets against you. Lena faced humiliation, violence, and betrayal, yet her will turned every blow into a stepping stone, proving that true power lies in enduring and outsmarting, not just surviving. Second, the story exposes how racism isn't a lone act but a web, from Karen's petty bigotry to Richard's lethal schemes, woven into institutions meant to protect, not destroy. It's a wake-up call. Prejudice thrives when unchallenged, and silence is complicity. Third, victory comes at a cost. Lena reclaimed Horizon Airways, but lost billions and bore scars. A reminder that justice isn't cheap or clean, but worth every bruise if it shifts the tide. Finally, the twist of a new enemy lurking teaches us that the battle never truly ends. It evolves, demanding vigilance, not complacency. This isn't just Lena's story. It's a mirror for anyone who's been judged, dismissed, or attacked for who they are, urging us to stand, fight, and rewrite the rules when they're rigged. So what's the takeaway? Resilience turns victims into victors, but only if we confront the rot head-on, together. How far would you go to right a wrong? Drop a comment with number 1 if you'd fight like Lena, hit like if this fired you up, and subscribe for more racism stories that hit hard and inspire harder. Share this if you believe justice deserves a voice. Thanks for riding this roller coaster with us. Here's to courage, truth, and a world where no one's forced to stand for being themselves.